This is my audience. Whipping, freezing, beating, scalding. These are just a few of the numerous brutal military investigative techniques used in today's political climate. In the modern world, countries can field hostile disputes completely under the radar, using covert operations and secret, brutal interrogations. Some argue that torture is justifiable or even necessary in a climate when a larger group's safety is at stake and private information must be overturned. However, it is inarguably unjust to expose any human to the horrible conditions of modern-day torturous interrogations. Today, I will first discuss the faults in torture as an interrogation technique from a strategy perspective. Then, I will inform about the severe long-term effects of physical and psychological trauma and argue that it should not be inflicted against any human. Finally, I will discuss the capacity for violence, such as torture implemented by one government against another, to escalate conflicts and create an intensified state of global affairs. Torture has no place in military interrogations because it is largely ineffective at resolving conflicts, because torture can cause irreparable physical and psychological harm, and because a state of global torture only serves to escalate international conflicts. Torture should never be used in military interrogation because it is one of the least effective methods of solving conflicts. Torturous interrogations only lead to further inefficiencies as government officials suffer from lack of direct communication with one another. Instead, interrogations amount to a lot of physical harm and still yield minute and unreliable results. In fact, a Human Rights Watch report, which compiled the input of more than 25 former US agents, concluded that the application of physical, emotional, and psychological pressure can force a victim of torture to say just about anything to end a painful experience. This means that detainees are likely to give evidence that isn't even correct to their torturers. Is it really worth inflicting pain on someone for information that isn't even reliable? Not only is torture ineffective, but it can also be devastating in the long-term effect it creates for those who are exposed. Brutal interrogation techniques should also not be implemented because of their capacity to create physical, mental, and emotional harm. According to a PBS report, brain study specialists assert that physical and psychological torture can cause the brain to become conditioned by its experience of extreme fear and stress, and therefore can cause permanent damage and lasting effects on a person's temperament and actions. The mind of the prisoner exposed to physical and psychological torture begins to turn against itself. Not only is this morally unjust, but again, it contributes to an unclear investigation and creates a long-term gap in what we find moral as a society. In our modern political climate, it is so divided and easy to say each man for himself and attack someone because they are not our political ally. However, it is never just to inflict such torture against any human being. In addition to the moral implications of barbaric investigations, a government should understand the way that torture as an interrogation technique plays into international relations and the way that powers interact with one another. Torture is unfavorable as an interrogation technique because of its capacity to escalate the state of conflict and lead to greater atrocities and violence on all sides. Regardless of the typical covert nature of government torture and violent investigation techniques, knowledge or fable of a country's brutality towards another power's detainees undoubtedly reaches government officials on the other side. Each power engages in a power struggle to one-up each other and ultimately hurts their own men as a violent struggle ensues. According to conflict experts at beyond intractability, a great deal of conflict escalation is inadvertent and occurs without implications being considered. This is the case represented in many international disputes in which prisoners are taken into custody. Because torture has become a generally accepted practice, officials on either side of modern conflicts don't bat an eye before bringing intense pain to their adversaries, even though it makes things worse for their men in the end. Clearly, investigation, brutality, and military proceedings has the capacity to do much more harm than good. In conclusion, torture as an interrogation technique brings with it many problems, while there exists little evidence of beneficial outcomes. Torturous interrogation techniques not only create inefficiencies and unreliability of information, but they also create irreparable harm and escalate military conflicts, and for that reason should never be supported or implemented. Thank you.